is Anika. I'm part of the data science discovery team, and in this video today we will be looking at polling and sampling situations. So let's go ahead and get started. So here it says match the following examples with their best fitting description, and in this video I'll do a couple of different questions to cover all kinds of situations. So here, your professors who love Taylor Swift ask each person whether or not they are Swifties and offer extra credit to those who say yes, right? So if a person it says the professors offered extra credit to those who say yes, right? So even if I'm not a Taylor Swift fan, I'm more inclined to say yes, because as a student, a lot of students want extra credit, right? I would want extra credit too. So this is kind of going to affect my response, right? This is going to affect a lot of people's response because of this extra incentive to say a particular answer. So even, people who respond to this survey will be more likely to say yes and basically lie because of this extra incentive. So this is actually an example of response bias, because this extra credit affects their response, right? It's because it doesn't, the survey is not capturing their true answer. There's something involved within this situation that is affecting the response that is collected from these students, right? So this is response bias. And then your professors who love Taylor Swift ask a random sample of students in Stat 107 whether they are fans of Taylor Swift or not. If their response is no, they lose points on their exam. Right, so this is another example of basically a situation that is going to affect their response, right? People are going to be less inclined to say no because nobody wants to lose points on their exam. And then it says here, if they respond yes or do not respond, there is no penalty, right? So there's kind of two situations that will happen, right? One, everyone's response is going to get affected, right? Nobody will want to say no because nobody wants to lose points on their exam. So that's an example of someone's response getting affected from this situation, right? And then number two, if they respond yes or do not respond, there is no penalty. So not only will people be less inclined to say no, people will be more inclined to not even respond to the survey, right? Because there's going to be no penalty for people who don't respond. So again, this is going to cause basically non-response bias as well, because not everyone's going to even answer or send a response to their survey, right? So there's going to be response bias here because everyone's response is going to get affected, right? No one's going to say no, or less people will say no because nobody wants to lose points. And then two, there's going to be non-response bias happening because people are going to be inclined to not respond just so they don't lose points on their exam, or even say yes just because then they won't lose points on their exam, right? So there's actually both of these types of biases happening in this situation here. And then this was Taylor Swift in polling and sampling. If we go to this situation here, right, it says here, Group wants to sample his minions to find out which species of banana they enjoy the most. When he presents the cheaper grocery store bananas, he describes them as healthy and delicious, but does not describe the alternative choice in the same way. So what bias is present, right? So obviously there's a certain, it says when he presents the cheaper grocery store bananas, he describes them as delicious and healthy, right? So he's obviously affecting the response of the minions by describing these cheaper the ones that he got from the cheaper grocery store as delicious and healthy, right? But does not describe the alternative choice in the same way. So this is obviously going to, affect their response, because you're affecting the how people perceive the different options, right? The delicious and healthy one is perceived as maybe delicious and healthy because that's what he has stated, while the alternative choice is kind of just presented, right? So this is obviously going to affect someone's response because people are more inclined to enjoy the bananas from the cheaper grocery store because they are perceived and described as delicious and healthy. And then here, Vector, the world's #1 supervillain, wants to find an aquatic animal to buy for his mansion. To make the decision, he asked a random sample of 100 people to basically choose between these things, right? So what bias is present in this sample? So basically you want to find some sort of animal to put in his mansion, and he collects a random sample of 100 people to choose between these animals, right? So I think this is a pretty good situation, right? Because one, there is random sampling involved, right? And we're just having the people selected choose between these options. So I would honestly say that this is not a biased sample, because you're choosing a random sample from 100 people, right? You're selecting a sample that is representative of your population because there is randomization involved. So this is actually not a biased sample. So for this one, Agnes wants to find the best present for Gu's birthday. To make the decision, she only asks Kyle the dog who approves of anything edible, right? So you're basically asking only one person from this entire family about the best birthday present, right? And it says here, Kyle the dog approves of anything edible. So obviously his or Kyle the dog's choices are not representative of the entire population, right? It's just one person you're asking for this study instead of like a whole group of people, right? So this is actually an example of selection bias here, because the dog doesn't represent the population accurately, right? It's only one basically individual who is part of this sample, who also approves of anything edible. So the responses you'll get are going to be inaccurate, and that results in selection bias because your sample in the first place wasn't representative enough. So that was the Minions and sampling, and the last one we will go through is the Charli XCX bias. Match the following examples with their best fitting description. So Carly, who loves Charli's Brat album, asks each student whether or not they love Brat and offers extra credit to those who say yes, right? So even if I don't love the album, any student is going to be more inclined to say yes because people want extra credit, right? So this actually results in response bias because this situation is affecting people's responses, right? They're not going to respond accurately and will be more inclined to say yes because of the extra credit involved. And then here, Carly, who loves Charli's Brat album, asks a random sample of students in Stat 107 whether or not they are fans of the album. If their response is no, they lose points on the midterm exam. If they respond yes or do not respond, there is no penalty, right? So this is very similar to that question we saw a couple minutes ago, right? Where there's two things that are happening here, right? One is people are less inclined to say no because nobody wants to lose their points on the exam, right? So they're going to change their response. If it was originally no, people are going to change their response from no to either yes or do not respond, right? Because if they respond yes or do not respond, there is no penalty. So one, you're affecting people's responses, right? They're not inclined to say no. They're eventually going to respond yes or do not respond. And then two, you're actually making people not respond to the survey, because if you don't respond, there's no penalty. So there's response bias happening here because we lose points if we say no. So that's going to affect our response. And then also non-response, because you're encouraging people to not respond just because there's no penalty for doing that. So this is actually going to contain both of these biases here. And then here are surveys given to people after listening to the Brat album only if they ask for it. So you have kind of a population, right? And to choose your sample, you're basically only giving the survey to people if they ask for it. So in that sense, the people are basically self-selecting themselves for this study that is happening, right? Only if they ask for the survey are they going to be part of that sample group. So basically, this sample that you have here is not representative of the population because these people actually select themselves to be part of the sample, right? They ask for the survey, and because you're only giving the people who ask for it, this sample is going to be people who are not representative of the population, probably people who are on either extreme, right? People who are people who really like Charli's music, right? Who are very big fans, or people who strongly oppose it. Usually the extremes are more willing to respond to a survey than, people kind of in the middle and those who don't care about, these albums are. So that way your sample is not representative. And then a sample is chosen randomly from the population of people who have listened to her album. This is actually none of the above, right? This is a really good sample because it's chosen randomly from the population, which is basically what we want. That's a representative sample because there's randomization involved. And then Carly randomly selects these group of students from Data Science Discovery and sends them a link to an anonymous survey about her album. When you check the results, not everyone has filled it out, right? So because not everyone has filled it out, this is actually an example of non-response bias, right? Because not everyone is responding. Like there's non-responses in there, right? So because there's blank results, that's an example of non-response bias. So hopefully these series of questions were helpful. The main part is just kind of deciding where the bias is occurring and then kind of going through those definitions and seeing what makes sense. So if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see you next time. Bye.